The knock never came. Only the cry did, thin and desperate, drifting through the screen door of a small house on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina, on a rain-soaked October night. Grace Whitfield opened her door, expecting a stranger asking for directions. Instead, she found a woven basket on the porch step, a trembling infant wrapped in a faded yellow blanket, and a note pinned to the fabric that read only, "Please keep her safe. I'll come back for her, I promise." Grace stood frozen in the doorway, the wind pulling at her cardigan, and in that single moment, her entire life quietly rearranged itself. If you believe in kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, I'd love for you to like this video. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel before we continue. Grace was 34. A schoolteacher who had buried her husband 2 years earlier after a sudden illness took him far too soon. She had grown used to a quiet house, to grading papers alone at the kitchen table, to a grief that had softened into something she carried rather than something that crushed her. She had never imagined a baby would be the thing to crack that quiet wide open. She called the local sheriff that night, filed every report she could, and waited for someone to claim the child. No one did. Weeks became months. The county eventually granted Grace temporary guardianship, while the search for the mother continued, and somewhere in the sleepless nights, the bottle warming at 3 a.m., the tiny hand wrapping around her finger, Grace stopped thinking of the baby as a stranger's burden and started thinking of her as her daughter. She named her Hope because it felt like the truest word she knew. The 2 years that followed were not easy. Grace's salary stretched thin against diapers and daycare, and there were nights she cried quietly in the bathroom, overwhelmed and unsure if she was doing anything right. Her neighbor, a widower named Samuel Carter, who ran the hardware store down the road, became an unexpected anchor, fixing her porch light, teaching Hope to stack wooden blocks on his back steps, reminding Grace, on her hardest days, that showing up mattered more than being perfect. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, Grace built a life around a little girl with copper curls and a laugh that could fill an empty house. She taught her to pray before meals, to name the birds in the backyard, to fall asleep to the sound of rain on the roof. Hope called her Mama before she called anything else. Grace had stopped waiting for the knock on the door. She had started believing this was simply her family now. Then, on a warm afternoon in June, a car she didn't recognize pulled into her driveway, and a young woman stepped out. Thinner than the photograph on the old missing persons flyer, her eyes red-rimmed and searching. Her name was Charlotte Reyes, and she said the words Grace had feared for 2 years. "I want my daughter back." Charlotte explained through broken sentences that she had been 19, homeless, fleeing an abusive relationship, with no money and no safe place to raise a child. She had chosen Grace's porch because she'd once been a student in Grace's classroom and remembered her as the kindest person she knew. She had spent 2 years fighting her way back to stability, finishing her JED, getting sober, finding steady work, all so she could come back and be the mother she swore she would be. Grace stood on that same porch, Hope's small hand in hers, and felt her heart break and mend in the same breath. There was no villain in this story, only 2 women who loved the same child fiercely and differently. Over the weeks that followed, through supervised visits, tears, and long conversations on that porch swing, Grace and Charlotte chose something rare. They chose each other. Rather than a courtroom battle, they built a bridge. Hope would know 2 mothers, one who gave her life and one who gave her a home when she had nowhere else to go, and both would remain in her world, side by side, for every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who believes love can hold more than one shape. And before you go, I'd love for you to leave a comment below and tell me, do you believe some families are chosen, not born? Because Grace Whitfield believes it with her whole heart. And so, now does Hope.